Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Dutts. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague, somehow not the sickest person in this house, is Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Very well, thank you very much, as you can tell by my croaky monotone.
But you're not the sickest person in your house at the moment, which makes a refreshing change, because unfortunately Zoe has the tonsillitis.
She does. She's been a little star. She was in hospital all day Sunday and Sunday night. Came home yesterday. She didn't want to take her medicine at first, which, I can't imagine why, because Daddy loves taking medicine. But yeah, she's taking it now. She's much better. She's bouncing around, but she still sounds like she could sing a passable cover of Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Baby.
Excellent. Gotta love that, Barry White. That is why there's been a gap. There's been two reasons for a gap in the podcast. One of them is I went on holiday. I say holiday. I went to a prison camp called Butlins, and then we were going to do one at the weekend after England's amazing draw. However, Zoe was in hospital with tonsillitis, so here we are back on our regular Wednesday jaunt, just with a gap.
Exactly.
Do you know that I became you last Saturday? I don't think I've told you this story, and I think I should tell all the people who listen because it's hilarious.
Well, you were ill?
No, even better. I was clumsy. I went to the local indoor play centre with James, my middle child, to watch, and he wants to go and play on all the slides and whatever. And as we're leaving, the girls are dancing, so I'm like laughing, isn't that funny, cute or whatever. The people who work there, that is. And I'm facing the wrong way, walking backwards. So I give James a high five as we walk out, and I turn round to walk out the door. That wasn't the door, Neil. That was the glass patio next to the door. The crack in my nose and my knee suggested that really hurt. Do I know what anybody saw of that? Absolutely not. The only person I knew laughed was James, as I quickly snuck out into the car with a slight tear in my eye due to the pain. And just pretended nothing had happened.
Of the two of us, because one of our children has had to watch us at least more than once watch a major sporting event, there's a better chance that James would know the phrase that rhymes with clucking banker that he should have admitted as soon as you hit it.
He was more than willing to tell anybody who'd listen. Daddy walked into a door.
See, obviously, this is a podcast and it's not a visual one, but I should just point out there seems to be some kind of weird hue on the screen, as your picture looks like a faded photo from the 1970s for some reason.
Because I am a faded photo from the 1970s.
Yeah, it's got this weird pinky purple shade to it.
Haze. I like it. Yeah. I have no idea what that is, and it looks fine on mine. While we bore people with our injuries and illnesses, standard show this week, we've got some Weird World, couple of absolute classics. Then Dutton, on his own, as always, because when he gets the famous people, interviewed the brilliant Andrew Brandt, and we will bring that podcast up. And then we continue the Neil Dutton 13 series with what can be described as what could win you a fantasy league this season, and that's the wide receivers.
Mm-hmm. Chomping at the bit.
Chomping at the bit. I am taking notes for that one, Dutton, so I can make sure that I get the right wide receivers like I did this year. Yep. So Dutton, let's do this, and let's get on with Weird World. So, when you have, like, hen and stag do's, and you get a bit drunk, and your mates make you do something stupid. For example, I went on a stag do, and friend of the show, Tony Esposti, was made to dress up as a cheerleader. He was pretty. He's prettier than his bosses at the moment. That kind of things happen. But when you're not doing that, and you're not on a hen or stag do, and you find strange things attached to people, a policeman may find this weird. An accused drunk driver may have had a few too many belts, including the chastity device around his private parts. When Tennessee Highway Patrol officers pulled over Curtis Edom on suspicion of drunk driving, they quickly realised it wasn't going to be a typical DUI stop. The 35-year-old was wearing some kind of red mesh see-through hose. Hose is tight for those who are unaware. with a ribbon tied in his goatee and some kind of little skirt. Oh, and a chastity belt around his private part, though they didn't notice that till later. My question is, Dutton, you haven't had a stag do yet. I have one coming up. Is there a possibility that one of us will make the other one wear a chastity belt?
I don't want anywhere on my internet banking history a transaction from the type of company that would sell said device. So I think you're pretty much safe. Thing is, though, if that's the day you're going to choose to go out wearing, what ostensibly sounds like a pornographic superhero costume, don't speed. I think the last thing you want...
He was like, don't speed. Also, don't be drunk behind the wheel.
Yeah, because, it's going to be, the one day I dress like this, I get pulled over.
What are the chances that would happen? I just love, as you said, I love the idea that the stories about the chastity belt, but I'm more interested in, like, you were drunk driving your car in a mini skirt and red tights with a ribbon in your goatee. I quote again, goatee. So you're not hiding the fact that you're a man with a big beard.
Mm. Where was it from? Burnley?
Tennessee. Oh. Just next to Burnley. Just next to Burnley, just down the road. Like a guy in Burnley would be called Dead in Red Hose. He'd be wearing like maroon.
Claret and blue
all the way. That reminds me, Mustache Dagger's what he does during the weekends when he's not doing TMS.
And he did have to delete loads of photos off his iPhone this week.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. And I helped him do that. I should have hacked his iCloud account instead. Have you ever fell asleep on a job, Dutton? I know the answer to this, by the way. But
no, I haven't actually. I've been
in the pictures.
I've been in work and gone for a sleep, but I've never fallen asleep doing it.
I can say that I never missed any of the Harry Potter when I was working in the screens. That's all I'll say on the matter. Sometimes you can fall asleep and no one would notice. An issue is if you're a shepherd. Police in the Spanish city of Huesca posted footage of 1,300 sheep roaming the streets. Why the 1,300 sheep roaming the streets? That was because the one shepherd responsible for the entire flock fell asleep on the job. The shepherd was watching the sheep over the night. No, he wasn't watching the sheep overnight. He was asleep, waiting to guide them north. Well, I think they went south. In the morning, the flock, where they were going to graze for the summer months, it didn't go to plan. No poop, Sherlock.
See, so you have to think that the credit crunch and the global economic crisis, that one shepherd to 1,300 sheep. I mean, I know you can't do a soccer camp or a cricket camp without a 1-to-10 ratio. And these are kids who can don't smell as a rule as bad as sheep do when they craft themselves and aren't going to be harvested for their wool. So I would imagine one person for 1,300 sheep it's a sad indictment of market forces.
The issue you've got to have is, do you think he fell asleep because before the other shepherd left, he did the day shift set? That was ironic. Can you just count all these sheep and he's just gone 1, 2, 3, and he got to like 5, fell asleep, and that was it. 1,300 sheep are like, get onto this guy. See, the better thing? What if I was the sheep? You would have got like a marker pen, keeping on the stag do theme, marker pen, razor. So before you've ran away, let's draw a penis on his head and shave his eyebrows.
Yeah, you say stag do. If it was sheep, would it not be more of a ram do?
We're all weak.
And that was very weak.
That was. As always, we love weird world stories. They're hilarious. People are weird. We like to hear about it. If you want to tweet us any suggestions, tweet us at waxing_lyrical. Or if you want to just talk to me and Dutton individually, at ndutton13 or at main7. So Dutton, now we're going to go on to your magnificent interview with Mr. Andrew Brandt. Andrew obviously has a multitude of jobs. He's a professor. He works in the university. He works for must be one of the few people who can manage to work for ESPN and Sports Illustrated. Dutton talks to him about his own podcast, so he's now a rival. Salary cap changes throughout the years due to the increased cap, and fears around injury-prone players. So let's get right on with that.
Delighted to be joined now by Andrew Brandt. You know him from ESPN, from MMQB, and from various appearances with Ross Tucker. Andrew, thanks very much for your time today.
Always good to be with you, Neil.
Since we last spoke, you've gone from being a regular guest on a podcast to being host of your own. How are you enjoying the change in dynamic in that way?
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Ross Tucker, who I've been doing an early morning show with for years on Wednesday mornings, which is put out as a podcast every week. We talked about sort of me hosting, and it was a real opportunity for me to sort of get with people, to take them behind the curtain of what goes on, kind of the inner workings of sports, being asked questions by someone who's been in their shoes, which is me, which can be agents, team executives, marketing company people, people that are involved in one way or another with the business of sports, and I'm going to make it beyond football as well, so it can be very free-flowing conversation about kind of what goes on behind the curtain, and really letting people kind of eavesdrop into conversations that happen all the time about sports that people aren't privy to. So I see it as a real opportunity. I've done a few. It's already gotten nice attention. We've already got sponsors, and I'm excited about adding it to my repertoire.
I mean, one of the first ones that you did do, I found particularly interesting as an Eagles fan, was with Joe Banner. It was very interesting to hear, how those Eagles teams that I started watching the NFL at the turn of the century, how they were built, because obviously, the young fan that I was, I won't say youngster because that would imply that I was ever young. Pretty much, it was just turn up on a Sunday, watch them, and then repeat the next week. Whereas as I've got older, I've got a bit more interested in how teams are built and how the game is played away from the field. So that was very interesting to hear about his role in building those teams.
Yeah, Joe's a good friend, and as I mentioned on the podcast, Joe Banner was involved in sort of running the financial part of the Eagles years before I joined the Green Bay Packers, and I sort of looked around when I got the gig and said, who is someone I admire the way they're running the finances for the team, I admire the way they handle contracts, and he popped up right away. So he became a bit of a mentor, and then we became friends. And interestingly enough, I now live in Philadelphia, as he does, literally a block apart. So that podcast was done where I just walked over with my computer, and we sat down at his kitchen table and knocked it out.
If only all podcasts were that easy to arrange.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, we talk about the business of sport. It's a busy time of the year. It's not as busy as other times, but we've come to a part of this season, the off season, the NFL, where we have this second round of cuts, as it were, the post June 1 cuts. One question I've got is why was June 1st picked as this cut-off period for contracts, dead money? It just seems a bit unusual, a bit of unusual time for me.
Yeah, it's interesting, Neil, because before answering sort of why they picked the date, I guess the answer right away is I don't know why they picked that date. It just sort of came out long before I got involved with the NFL. That was sort of the line in the sand date where, again, for people who don't follow it too much without getting too much in the weeds with Cap 101, it's that if you want to cut a player, release him, and you have cap acceleration. For instance, let's just use an example. You sign a guy to a 5-year, $10 million bonus. For cap purposes, the bonus is prorated $2 million a year. If you decide after 2 years you've had enough of them, well, that's going to accelerate $2 million a year for 3 years, $6 million into your cap. If you release them before June 1, that $6 million goes into your cap. If we say it, this year, it would have gone into the 2016 cap. If you release them after June 1st, only the portion for the year, which would be $2 million, would go into 2016, and the additional $4 million would go into 2017. Couple things here. Number one, my philosophy in running the Packers was always to take our medicine now rather than later. If we had a guy we knew in God's green earth was never going to be on our team next year, my advice to our general manager was always, let's do it before June. Just get him out, take the medicine, take the cap hits, so we're clear of him from our books going forward. Some teams obviously had different feelings about that. They become so strapped against the cap that they wait and they do it after June, and they are able to sort of push the problem out some more. The other part of this, though, Neil, is we don't see hardly any, if at all, of these releases anymore. Two reasons. Number one, teams have become much better in managing the cap, doing things like I talked about, taking their pain and clearing the space for the future. And number two, virtually every team seems to be okay with the cap. So they're not racked up against the cap where they have to hold guys until after June in order to just survive and breathe and have the cap space to operate. And there are teams that are truly flush with cap room, whether it's the Browns or the Jags or even a team like the Packers or the Bears with just a lot of cap room that they could play with and not have to worry about these kind of things.
Is the fact that the salary cap seems to be going up by the same amount roughly every year, are we eventually going to get to a point where the salary cap is no cap, as it were, because it's just, it almost gets easier with every year because you're going to have an extra 10 million or so next year, so it might, release of any pain you do have?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. The other part that has been operating since the new CBA in 2011 that was not in place when I was doing this through 2009 is that you can roll over cap room. So you end the year where you didn't use a lot of cap room, you have 10, 12, 15, $20 million, you can roll it over. So instead of the next year where your cap, if the cap is $140 million, you make it $150 million or $160 million simply by rolling over money you didn't use in the earlier years. That's a good thing for the players, and it's a good thing for the teams. The issue is, if I'm a player, I want to ask this question because, frankly, I don't know the answer. Are teams actually using this money? Because we see teams like the Jaguars and Raiders just build up 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, $70 million of available room, and where's it going? Now, again, there are some loose minimums in terms of year-by-year spending, but it just seems to me you have these rookie salaries that are now lower. It seems like veterans are getting squeezed on the way out. And aside from these hot free agents that happen, 1 week in March every year, it's hard to know where all this money's going. That's really my question.
And you talk about with the rookies, obviously the days of these unproven, untested people coming in and becoming multi-millionaires before they even get into training camp, they're long gone. With the current wage scale, and there have been a few notable examples in recent years, is there, I don't want to say much point, but could a rookie save himself some money by not bothering to have an agent for that first contract?
Yeah, I think in a lot of parts of the draft, that on its face is true, meaning that this new CBA has preset, predetermined, prefabricated rookie contracts in terms of money. So the fifth pick in the second round knows exactly what he's going to make the moment he's drafted. The money is set. Basically, it's going to be a preset bonus with minimum salaries. There are little pockets of the draft where some negotiation is required. This year it seems to be the third round where there's some highs and lows and some machinations going on. So I would always say in those little pockets where there's no rhyme or reason to it, you do need an agent. and I've written and talked about this often, I think an agent provides value to these players. The problem is it provides value in areas that aren't fee-based. So agents set up training. Agents talk to general managers about players. Agents go visit players' parents. Agents counsel, advise, pep up, psychology, sociology. They provide a lot of services to these players and their families and their girlfriends and their wives and their support systems. But the only way you invoice for fees as an agent is the contract. And for the rookie contracts, it's like 2 hours of work. So the problem is not that you don't need an agent. The problem is agents help, but it almost needs to change the whole fee model. So agents should charge for all the work they do in setting up workouts, in training, in dealing with the family, whatever hourly or monthly charge that should be, and then have that hourly or monthly charge factored into the contract too, because it's not that difficult. So this is the real issue with agents. It's just, how do you deal with a fee when it's based on a contract that's probably the least of the services you provide?
There was a rumour that came out, I think it was late last night, well, late in UK time, that Brandon Boykin, formerly of the Eagles, the Steelers and the Panthers, may have a degenerative hip problem that could be career-threatening. And obviously he's been traded and he's been released by 2 teams recently, and no one could seem to know why. So it does seem that, maybe if there is a medical issue, that would explain why teams haven't been willing to commit. The question I've got, and it's a discussion I've had with some friends of mine, is if in college, and this is, I'm asking you, with your front office hat on, if
right.
during the evaluation process, you've got 2 players who are, you're right next to each other on your board, one of them, though, you think, you find out he has a medical problem and he might not last his rookie contract, or another player has tested positive for a few he's failed a few tests in college, and it's a likelihood he'll probably be suspended during his first contract. Which, in your opinion, is the bigger risk to take?
I hate to say it because it sounds like I'm soft on drugs, which I'm not. I think that can be character defining. That can be affect, I think, people's self-discipline when they're involved with drugs, and self-motivation, which is very important as a success. But if you're looking at it in crass terms of running a team, you're very scared of injury-prone players. I always advised our people, whether it was acquiring players through the draft or free agency, let's really zero in on the medicals, because it's just like the stock market. Past performance is a great indicator of future results. So if someone has gotten injured often in the past, that is highly predictive. And the big part of value with players of all sports is availability and durability. I always looked at that as high value. And again, I was so spoiled. We had Brett Favre, and beyond his talents and his great play on the field, what always gave us so much comfort was his availability and durability. We just knew he was going to play. And that's the most important position on the field, and we always had that comfort level. Hell, we could have had games where we had no backup quarterbacks, and it wouldn't have been a problem. I think it's not a zero-sum game where you say you'd rather have someone who smokes pot than gets hurt a lot. But I just think you have to evaluate risk at different levels. And it's been proven where we took on players with injury histories. They may have had knee problems in the past, and then they come in and they have hip problems or calves or other extremities, basically overcompensating for injuries they already had. So anyway, that was a huge red flag for me with people coming in with injury histories.
I suppose, well, there's always the mentality is if someone is injury prone, as I say, for a variety of reasons, if he's, it's a compensatory injury, or you have a player who has maybe, he's mixing with a bad crowd away from the field, there's always the likelihood that maybe within the team there's some kind of support group, a strong locker room or a veteran player who can help more than someone who can, it's hard, it's easier to have a good, friend by your side than it is to get, basically your ACL repaired for for combat the next week, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I just think that a lot of the things you just said, I always use the phrase, a wish is not a plan. And you see that a lot with teams that say, bring in a problem player. And they say, well, he'll be around our guys, we'll be around a structured environment, this coach, this player, this veteran team. Again, that's a wish, not a plan. If you have a plan in place for a problem player who's had issues off the field, whatever it may be, okay. But you can only have so much of that. And again, back to the injury side, I mean, we'd have older players that were valuable guys, been around 8-10 years, and they'd have practice schedules that were very different. They'd get off a day or two a week. They'd have lighter practices. And you can do that. You can make exceptions for a couple of older veteran guys, but you better not do it. It better not become a habit, because then players start saying, well, I've been in the league 6 years. This guy's in 7 years. Why can't I get that treatment? So from a team executive point of view, my concern was always precedent. When you allow something to one player, you better believe you're going to hear from others. Why can't I do that?
The last question before I let you go. Obviously, very, very grateful for your time. The biggest contract situations of the season so far have obviously both been about quarterbacks, and one of them's Sam Bradford, the other one's Ryan Fitzpatrick. I know you've spoke to Tom Condon on the Business of Sports podcast, but from looking on the outside with a fair amount of insider knowledge, how do you think that these players or agents have actually? I mean, how poorly or well have they played their hand? I think I know it's probably more towards the poorly side of it, judging by how long they have seemed to drag on.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ones going on. You mentioned, the Bradford situation, I think, was one where it was unfortunate that I think the Eagles' plans changed. I think they signed Bradford thinking he's our guy, and he's our guy beyond this year. And then they got in a position to get to number 8, then they got in a position to get to number 2 and get a future franchise player, they hope. So I think Bradford was venting about, having his replacement signed very publicly, and knowing that, he has a bad game, he has a couple bad interceptions, the drumbeat might grow for this super rookie that they've invested so much in to get on the field, and that's not a good situation for anyone to be in. But one thing you have to look at, that was March or April or May even. It's a long way to September. And even now, as we speak here in June, seems like all is good with the Eagles. Bradford's the main guy. Wentz is learning the system. Everyone's sort of calmed down about Bradford and Condon, and it's working out. I guess looking forward, some big negotiations I see are two that are really going to set the market for offense and defense. On the defense side, it's going to be Von Miller, the Super Bowl MVPs, on a franchise tag. The deadline's July 15th, meaning he does a deal by then long-term, or he plays on a one-year, $14 million deal. I think like all these cases, like Demaryius Thomas last year with the Broncos, he'll get it done, and it'll be on July 15th, and it'll be a monster contract in the Ndamukong Suh type range. On the offensive side, it's very clear the Indianapolis Colts want to do a deal with Andrew Luck, and when you hear that, of course it's going to happen. The highest per year average is probably anywhere from 22 to 23, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees. And I think we're going to see a new high there, whether it's $24 or $25 million a year. and it's going to be Andrew Luck, and it's going to be a monster contract. And the Colts have already given one of those monster contracts to Peyton Manning. He actually was cut a year in because he had back issues and ended up on the Broncos. But it'd be interesting to see how high that deal goes. I'll be looking at it in terms of guarantee and everything else.
I think it's all one of the things that you always say and tweet about. You know, whenever a contract is signed, it's the first number is very, very seldom. It's usually not the real number. It's, you know, it sounds nice, you know, in a press statement and when Adam Schefter and the likes are tweeting it, but it's very, very unlikely that the player will see every single nickel of that huge mega deal.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not basketball or baseball where it is fully guaranteed, so you have a much different feeling about it.
Well, Andrew, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking to you. Thank you very much. Where can people find your writings and your other musings?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I mean, I'm always on Twitter at Andrew Brandt. I'm on ESPN just when something's going on about sports business, sports law, usually the Outside the Lines program. Writing on the MMQB through Sports Illustrated with Peter King. Column comes up on Thursday mornings. And got, as you mentioned right away, I have my new Business of Sports podcast. I have one out this week with ESPN's Jeremy Schaap, talking about the life and legacy of Muhammad Ali. And we'll have one every week going forward over through the summer. So lots of ways to follow me, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Dutton, that was the brilliant Andrew Brandt there, who unfortunately went with the I'd rather have a druggie than an injured player.
Yeah, I mean, I do actually agree to his point because there are human systems that can be put in place. I mean, Dallas Cowboys famously, you know, hired a 24-hour bodyguard for Des Bryant, for example. But there are no systems you can put in place to stop a player getting injured. It's just, you know, it's unfortunately it's the one with your name on, and he could live in a rubber room. He could have 6 armed guards, but if he treads on a pebble and tears his ACL, or in attempting to catch his mobile phone, breaks his elbow, as Darren McFadden did. Yeah. See, I mean, the other week I dropped my phone because I made the unconscious choice between that and my sandwiches, and I saved my sandwiches. So I cracked my screen, and it cost me £80 to get it fixed because, yes, it was under warranty if it had broke, not if I'd essentially thrown it on the road. But in the recent years, we've had, say, Darren McFadden, trying to save his phone, breaking his elbow. There was Nate Burleson, you know, who broke his arm trying to save a pizza because he broke too sharply. And if you go all the way back, there was Dave Besant of Chelsea who broke his foot when he opened a cupboard, a bottle of mayonnaise fell out, and he tried to trap it with his foot. It smashed and broke his foot. 2 questions. 1, you're a goalkeeper, don't try to trap anything. 2, why's your mayonnaise in the cupboard, man?
It should be in the fridge. If it's not open, I can understand the concept of it being in the cupboard. But once it's opened, it must be in the fridge. Mayonnaise should be cold.
Yeah, freak.
And the pizza, like, we both was a broken body part of pizza in that time, so Nate Burleson one is an issue. My question is, you were saving your sandwich, what was on it?
This is the annoying thing. It was pastrami on Warburton's Mega Toasty. So it wasn't even an impressive sandwich. It certainly wouldn't have cost me £80.
The thing is, though, on a Mega Toasty, it probably would have bounced back to you due to the thickness of the bread. You would have said you should just it's one for the future, and you'll remember never to do it again.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it wasn't like I wasn't eating the sandwich. It was in tin foil. I was going to work, but I had that many things in my arm. I just felt something go, and I just grabbed something and heard something else smash.
You're an idiot.
Yep.
Dutton, we've done QBs, we've done running backs. We're now into what it has essentially become the premium fantasy position, and that's wide receivers. So let's get on with Neil Dutton 13's wide receivers.
Now, wide receivers have the advantage that I have actually finished my projections. So rather than just, guess, and give my reasons for why I want these 13 players. I actually have statistics that I have projected using the resources at my disposal from the good people at Rotoviz. So I can't give you projected stats for these people.
Go for it, Dutton. Number 13.
Number 13 is the Miami Dolphins. Number 14, Jarvis Landry, who I've projected for 97 catches, 1,183 yards, and 7 touchdowns. It's a new offense. Jarvis Landry is still going to be a bit of a target hog because he's the only proven commodity in the offense. So it's one of those, if you want to have a piece of anything in Miami, I would advise it to be Jarvis Landry.
Dutton, give me them stats again.
97 catches, 1,183 yards, 7 touchdowns.
That is the 13th best wide receiver in Dutton's list. He's going to get nearly 100 catches, over 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's PPR gold and would be excellent in any fantasy league.
My projections, the last time I checked, I had 26 wide receivers going over 1,000 yards and 1 tight end.
And the winner is?
But I did have 10 running backs going over 1,000, which is more than last year. So.
There we go. Dutton, number 12.
Number 12, Brandon Cooks, New Orleans Saints. It's an offense it's got some new pieces, but Cooks is the big play machine in there. I mean, Kobe Fleener is he's gonna soak up targets because that's what that tight end does in the Saints offense. But I just think the way Cooks is used, if he becomes more of he's a deep threat because of how quick he is. He's not the biggest, obviously, but I've got him at 90 catches, 1,185, and 8 touchdowns.
Number 11, Dutton.
Number 11, and initially I had him higher, but as I started doing a few more corrections, he fell down. That's Allen Robinson, the apple of Matt Harmon's eye. I've said, before about the Jaguars, I don't think they want to be throwing it all over the park. They want to run the ball a bit more. They want a bit more ball control and not put up video game numbers. But Robinson is still going to command the majority of targets. So I've got him for 81 catches, 1,261 yards, and 9 touchdowns.
And that means that, just from what you're saying there, Haynes isn't in the top 13, right?
No, he's not.
Okay. Number 10.
Number 10 is the returning Jordy Nelson. We've seen... there used to be this article every year. It was like the most overrated player in the NFL, and it was usually Michael Vick, let's be honest, or Brian Urlacher.
Brian Urlacher, he loved giving it to Brian Urlacher, didn't he?
Well, I think the point you could make the point that probably the most underrated player in the NFL, or certainly one of them last year, was Jordy Nelson, for how different and you have to say poor at times the Green Bay offense looked without him. He's back. It's no guarantee he's going to be back to his old self, but you still need to respect him because he's never been the quickest, but he just always seemed every week to have one. Oh, Nelson's wide open 30-yard touchdown. So I've got him for 87 receptions, 1,273 yards, 9 touchdowns.
Correct me if I'm wrong, when we did the quarterbacks, Rodgers was 1, right?
He was.
So on that comparison, he needs Nelson to be fit and back to these kinds of numbers to be that kind of QB1.
Yeah, because if Nelson gets these type of numbers, Cobb's numbers go up. Jared Cook's numbers probably go up, and Eddie Lacy's do. But if you take away Nelson's, you're asking Cobb to take on a role that he's not built for. Yeah, and as a result, everyone suffers.
Absolutely. Number 9, Dutton.
Number 9 is the man that you want to go to at the moment if you need some money, apart from Fletcher Cox. Keenan Allen, San Diego Chargers.
He is. So, Dutton, in the Rivers offense, and assume this 13 are kind of based on standard scoring.
Scoring, yeah. Does
Allen become even more valuable in a PPR?
Absolutely. I mean, he only played, I think it was 7 games last year, and he was on course for something ridiculous. He was on course for Antonio Brown numbers. Now, obviously, you can argue he's a poor man's Antonio Brown in the sense that he doesn't play in an offense with quite as many options, and he doesn't do as much after the catch as downtown. But still, he's going to get, he's going to get his short dump offs over the middle. He's going to run the middle of the field, and if he can just score a few more touchdowns, I have him down at 7 to go with his 103 receptions and 1230 yards. But I'll be honest, these are just projections. This isn't the be all end all. This is, some of these cases it's a floor, others it's the ceiling. I think this is Keenan Allen's floor, to be honest.
Number 8, Tom.
Number 8 is someone who's being written off in some regards because of uncertainties at the quarterback position of his team, and that's Demaryius Thomas. But what everyone is forgetting is that Demaryius Thomas played with Tim Tebow and Kyle Orton, and did have success with them.
And he played with dead man Peyton Manning last year.
Exactly. So Mark Sanchez, who if he can be faulted for one thing, and he can, he may occasionally zero in on one receiver, which would be bad news for Emmanuel Sanders. But we've seen as well in Gary Kubiak's offenses over the years, they can prop up one wide receiver above all else. And as much as I like Sanders, I think that's going to be Demaryius Thomas. So 88 will get 88, 1291 and 9 touchdowns.
Good effort. Number 7.
Number 7, and this is dependent on his team re-signing a particular free agent to play quarterback and not start Geno Smith.
Can I guess that this is Brandon Marshall?
This is Brandon Marshall, who not the linebacker, who again has also been paid. I actually ran these numbers. Everyone was saying last year that Ryan Fitzpatrick was propped up by the fact that he had Eric Decker and Brandon Marshall, and as a result put up career numbers for him. Do you know, though, that the stats last year for Decker and Marshall were career numbers for them as well?
I didn't know that, especially for Marshall. I would have assumed that one of the 15 years that Jay Cutler threw 500 times at him in either Denver or Chicago would have been.
Yeah, targets per game, receptions per game, receiving yards, and touchdowns, I believe. I might be wrong with touchdowns, but most other stats were higher last year than in any other year of Brandon Marshall's career. So he's still going to be... Yeah, and I mean, this team, Matt Forte is going to come in, he's going to get his receptions. Eric Decker's going to score touchdowns, that's what he does. Brandon Marshall's going to be the target hog, because do you know how many receptions Jets tight ends had last year? Receptions, not touchdowns, receptions.
I don't know, it's an outrageously low, right?
8.
I would have said 13, so I'm glad I didn't do that to spoil the number.
Half a reception a game from tight end. I've got Marshall, 92 catches, 1257 yards, 9 touchdowns.
Number 6 done.
Number 6, Des Bryant. Now you could argue that Des Bryant is, probably the best red zone wide receiver in the NFL. You could probably say, between the 20s, there's other players you want, but get him down the scoring area, he's who you want. He's going to be helped by the fact it's going to be a low-volume passing attack. They're going to run this team through Zeke Elliott and not mobile phoneless Darren McFadden. So Bryant's going to have, assuming he comes back fit, which is a big assumption, but I think he will. He's going to have, of the players we've had so far, he's got the second lowest catches. He's got 86, but I've got him for 12.49 and 12 touchdowns.
That's Jerry-tastic, like loads of runs and then let's hit that 45-yard touchdown to Des Bryant.
If it works.
It does. Number 5 then.
Number 5, again, he's going to be the main receiving threat on a team that is going to run the ball an awful lot, and that's DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, as I say, we have no proof that Brock Osweiler is going to be an improvement on Brian Hoyer. We really don't. He's the most overpaid unknown quantity in the NFL, I think. Bill O'Brien does have this nasty habit, depends how you do it. If you've done well against the Texans, he'll try and sign you. They did it with Chris Polk, Bang Bang Chicken and Shrimp, a year ago, because a year before he got 65 yards on 8 rushes for the Eagles. So if you do well against if your contract's coming up and you've got a game this year against the Texans, you put a shift in, and Nuke's the best receiver. They went with Will Fuller, who's a speed guy. They've got Braxton Miller. who's a developing weapon, but by no means the finished product. They've got no tight end to speak of unless you throw J.J. Watt out there a couple of times. So the main receiving threat is DeAndre Hopkins. So I've got 97 receptions, 1365 yards, 8 touchdowns.
As Dutton said, obviously the quarterback situation in Houston is unknown because we don't know what Brock Osweiler is really. He played a handful of games last year. And you're thinking that's a lot of receptions and whatever. Let's not forget DeAndre Hopkins did all that kind of numbers last year with Brian Hoyer and Ryan Mallett as his quarterback.
And he put up pretty good numbers the year before when Ryan Fitzpatrick and Brandon Weeden, these people were his quarterback as well. So
it's just been a cavalcade of garbage in Houston at quarterback, and it hasn't stopped DeAndre from getting touchdowns and numbers. Number 4, Dutton.
AJ Green seems to have been slightly again forgotten. This team's the main fantasy argument is about Hill or Bernard. Or how effective Tyler Eifert can be, or this team's got no wide receivers. They lost Mo Sanu and Marvin Jones. They don't need a big name wide receiver because they've got AJ Green, who has been incredibly productive since he came into the league. We've seen that the Bengals' offense works best when Dalton and Green link up regularly. And also as well, what Green does is he scores touchdowns, which is a criticism you can say for some of the other people I've mentioned on this list. They don't score enough. Green does. So, especially with, no Sanu, no Jones, Tyler Eifert, we don't know how much he's going to play because he's always going to be injured. I've got 99 receptions, 1487 yards, and 11 touchdowns.
We're in that situation, Dutton, where they will probably attempt to play similar than Dallas, you would assume.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think Tony Romo loves Des Bryant, he doesn't love him as much as the Ginger Rifle loves AJ Green.
Nowhere near.
Number 3, Dutton.
Number 3, and the second 100 catch receiver. Now, this may be controversial, but it's Odell Beckham.
Why is it controversial, Dutton?
Maybe people would think I've been advising people that if they have a dynasty draft to take him first, or if he's not available, if you're picking second, take him there. And then I go in my projections, I have him third. But it's not like he'd be a bad pick at number 3 overall. He's been an absolute efficiency rating is off the chart since he's been in the league. He scores touchdowns at a rate of 1 a game. I actually have him at less than that this year, but I've got him at 1,555 receiving yards and 103 receptions. There's no ground game in New York. Bless them. They can't run the ball. Andre Williams looks better than ever. Yeah, but he's still crap. They're untried and untested at the other wide receiver spots. Victor Cruz. I'm with Wesley. Can we stop talking about until he actually shows us that he can actually play again? I'm through with it. Beckham, Eli and Beckham. Again, it comes down to this. It's a great combination of Eli and Odell, and it'll pay off in a big way for owners.
Number 2, Dutton.
Another man with question marks about surrounding talent, Julio Jones. As we stand now, I don't think it's a big surprise, the one name I haven't said yet, but we'll focus on Julio for now. We've said countless times that Kyle Shanahan feeds the ex-receiver almost to the ignorance of all other pass catchers. They didn't have a pass catcher the other side of him. Roddy White had been replaced by someone in the same jersey who was a rotting corpse. Jacob Tamme, bless him. I think it was average about 6 yards per net adjusted attempt. 6 yards, for crying out loud, mate. Matt Ryan fell away last year despite, he started the season well, but they didn't score touchdowns. They get into the red zone and then they'd have to kick field goals. So if your main competition for receptions and targets is Devonta Freeman, Julio Jones, I say I've got 119 receptions, 1,675 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He scored, I think it was something like 12 touchdowns in his first 18 NFL games. I think he's only scored something like 10 since, and he's been in the league since 2011.
As someone who was in it, who had a Shanahan offense, they don't throw it that much in the red zone. They try and score from on the ground, so it's not really that surprising for me that he hasn't got that many touchdowns in the last couple of years. But as you said, the amount of receptions and the amount of yards is unbelievable. Finally, Dutton, I'm guessing it's everyone's favourite Lego head as number one, Mr. Antonio Brown.
Downtown Antonio Brown. It's just absolutely phenomenal what he's done as an unheralded sixth round pick. How many people, when he got paid in 2012, I think it was, got the contract that Mike Wallace didn't want? And you look at how their careers have gone since then. I mean, I'm looking at the figures I've got for Brown, and I'm looking at them now thinking these might be too low. But it's 128 receptions, 1,712 yards, and 11 touchdowns. And I generally look at that now and think I've probably gone too low.
The Pittsburgh offense has the chance to be frightening, even with the loss of Wheaton, was it? No, Martavis Bryant. Sorry, Bryant. It's got the chance to be frightening. But
I think in his favour,
Brown makes it tick.
I think in the favour is, I mean, they're not going to go for 2 on every play. Very, very funny, Ben. Though. It would be cool. But if they go for 2 as often as they did last year, they're going to look for Brown in the Reds in the end zone. There's 2 more points potentially every week. So that just adds to his value.
Absolutely. Absolutely dreading Monday Night Football when we're going to get an absolute butt whipping off the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Bear in mind that the Steelers do have this wonderful ability to play down to the level of their opponent. So if, as we all hope, Washington are crap next year, you've got a chance.
We don't all hope that. Not
only
50% of the people on this call wish that.
Everyone that counts does.
Okay, thanks for that. Dutton, let's recap then. 13-10, please.
13, Jarvis Landry. 12, Brandon Cooks. 11, Allen Robinson. 10, Jordy Nelson.
9-5. What a way to make a living.
Absolutely. Keenan Allen, Demaryius Thomas, Brandon Marshall, Des Bryant, Nuke Hopkins.
And a top 4.
Top 4, AJ Green, Odell Beckham Jr., Julio Jones, Antonio Brown.
We've talked about it before, Dutton, in the no running back scenario. Let's say I'm picking 7 or 8 in my so I'm picking 7 or 8 in my snake draft. Is there a concept, like I did last year, of picking 2 wide receivers?
Absolutely. Get as many in as you can. I mean, let's say there's 13 here. There's people who just missed out, like Jeremy Maclin just missed out, T.Y. Hilton, Mike Evans. I generally think there are 16, maybe, wide receiver ones. Obviously, there can only be 12 because there's only... But I generally think if you went first 16 picks were all wide receivers, I don't think it'd be that preposterous.
Fantastic, Dutton, fantastic. Well, that is this week's show. It's took us a while to get here due to illness and holidays, but we've done it. We've given you some weird world. We spoke to the brilliant Andrew Brandt, and Dutton's given you his top 13 wide receivers who should help you get the most points to win your fantasy league.
Absolutely.
Dutton, any final thoughts?
Roysters, not sold in rough places.
This has been Wax and Lyrical. Get used to it.